words of our longtime colleague, friend, and past Commissioner Federal Glover, who served on this board for 25 years. Federal's impact on this agency, Federal brought passion, thoughtfulness, and a steady voice to every meeting and conversation behind the scenes. His leadership helped bring transformative projects to life, including the passing of Measure J, expansion of Highway 4, completion of E-BART service to Antioch, and the launch of ferry service in Richmond. These accomplishments reflect just a portion of his legacy. He was also an incredible, kind person and a friend and mentor to many of us. Federal retired from the Board of Supervisors and the CCTA Board in January 2025, but many of us had the privilege of working closely with him over the years. He believed deeply in the power of public service to improve lives, and he approached his role with integrity, humility, and a commitment to the people of Contra Costa County. We will miss him greatly. On behalf of the entire CCTA board and staff, we extend our heartfelt condolences to Federal's family, friends, and to all who had the honor of serving alongside him. At this time, we would like to have a moment of silence in his remembrance. Thank you for taking a moment of silence in his memory and for the lasting impact he will have on all of us. We now ask that you give your attention to the short video.
This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Citizens participating in person wishing to speak should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand in Zoom or submit a public speaker card, and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Terry Ann, please call roll.
Commissioner Alt-Stepper for Armstrong.
Here. He decided to go to his daughter's wedding.
Thank you for stepping in. Commissioner Arnridge.
Here.
Commissioner Bernal.
Here.
Commissioner Burgess.
Here.
Commissioner Carlson's absent. Commissioner Kelly.
Here.
Commissioner / Representative Nowak is absent. Commissioner Obringer.
I am here.
Commissioner Xavier.
Here.
Vice Chair G.
Here.
Chair Meadows. Representative Anderson.
Here.
Representative Alt-Wren for Foley.
Here.
Representative Worth.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. We have Commissioner / Representative Nowak and Commissioner Carlson absent.
The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please mute your mics if attending remotely. We'll now convene into a closed session. The commissioners will exit the boardroom and head over the Diablo Conference Room for a closed session to discuss two cases of existing litigation with the East Bay Municipal Utility District and Brossamore and Wall. Okay, we're back from closed session. Tamara will report out.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. The board took no reportable action on item 3A or 3B.
Thank you. The next agenda item is public comment. Terry Ann, do we have any written or verbal?
We do not have any written, verbal, or remote public comment.
Thank you. Sorry, didn't realize you weren't back. We have no, item 6, presentations. We have no presentations this evening. Next item is consent calendar. Are there any changes or comments from the authority board? Does anybody wish to pull an item? Is there any public comments on the consent calendar?
We have not received any public comment.
Perfect. Do you have a motion?
I would move the items as presented.
I'll second.
Terry Ann, could you please call roll?
Commissioner Arnridge,
Aye.
Commissioner Bernal,
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess,
Aye.
Commissioner Carlson is absent, Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Nowak, Commissioner Obringer,
Yes.
Commissioner Altstepper,
Yes.
Commissioner Xavier,
Aye.
Vice Chair G,
Aye.
Chair Meadows.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes with Commissioners Carlson and Nowak absent.
Thank you, Terry Ann. Regular agenda items, we now move to the regular agenda items under the Administration and Projects Committee. The first item is an informational item to be presented by Ryan McLean to provide an update on the status of the East Contra Costa County Automated Transit Network Project.
All right, good to go. Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Ryan McLean, Deputy Executive Director, Projects and Operations for CCTA. Here tonight to give an update on the Automated Transit Network ATN project for East Contra Costa County. Really the goal tonight is to bring you up to speed kind of on the history of this project and what work has been done to date. As an informational item, and then I'll be back in a couple months to bring forward an action item on it. So tonight is more of just an update. So the history of this project, it was originally done as the East County Dynamic Personal Microtransit, DPMT, feasibility study. DPMT is now ATN, so this is not an acronym you need to remember anymore. This is basically meaning the same thing, ATN and DPMT. The original feasibility study was completed in April 2021, and this looked at the viability of a personal microtransit type of solution for East County. It was done for the cities of Pittsburgh, Antioch, Oakley, and Brentwood at the time. It assumed the Glideways technology as kind of the demonstration technology for this type of project, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. But really, this was to evaluate the feasibility of a solution like this and to start to identify potential public and private funding sources to do this. So this project kind of feeds into East County's transit priorities. And those are to improve the transit user experience, meet the equitable access needs of East County, support economic development, prepare for future innovative transit, so not just thinking of the existing type of transit that's out there now, but beyond that, to really communicate the benefits of transit to the community and to improve connections to the existing transit system that's out there. So with that in mind, the feasibility study really kind of identified key parameters for requests for proposals that was then to go out. Those included the idea of on-demand transit with short wait times and individual vehicles. So you have the option to share or take an individual vehicle if you choose. This was centered around kind of a product that was fully automated, zero emissions, made in the USA, ADA accessible. And this wasn't necessarily required to be the same technology that was with Glideways. It could be a different technology. In terms of the operations, the idea was that it would be fully separated from traffic, so from cars, from people walking, people biking, that it was directionally separated so these things could travel back and forth without running into each other, and then an option to operate on roadways if that became something that we wanted to do. And this is really all centered around, how do we make transit trips without using the automobile? And so instead of driving to BART and parking in the parking lot, can you take this new type of transit to the BART parking lot, for example, or other types of transit? And the idea is that once someone gets in a car, it's harder to get them back out and into other transit modes. So this was trying to really solve that first last mile connection issue that is especially apparent in East County. But then along the way, you could also use this technology for your daily trips in the neighborhood as well. So something that has a higher density number of stations that are also much easier to just walk or bike to than, say, like a full BART station. So early project planning was really coordinated between CCTA and Tri-Delta, and that included coming up with a delivery strategy, including industry outreach, so going out and actually getting feedback from the industry on what options were out there, looking at different delivery options, and then coming up with that request for proposal that I mentioned. It was determined that this would be a public-private partnership, so actually looking at getting private investors in this, and that a delivery team would include the P3 developer, a technology partner, and a construction contractor. So really kind of delivering the full package. And that the contract would be between both CCTA and Tri-Delta and the developer team. So this is a two-step process. We're in step one still. Step one is divided into 3 phases. And so we're still in phase 1. But overall, the approach was phase 1 and phase 2 of the step 1 process would be completely funded by the developer and not require funding from the authorities. So phase 1 was to identify kind of the initial segment that we could do for this and the technology solution, to come up with a funding plan and confirm those original feasibility study assumptions, and to come up with an approach to doing the cost estimate and environmental review. Phase 2 would then commence the environmental scoping, and phase 2 is when we're really going to go out and look for those funding sources to actually deliver this project. Phase 3 would be grant funded, so the development team would not pay for phase 3. We'd be looking for grants for that, and obviously would be dependent on finding those grants before we move forward with that. And that's to advance to 30% design, get environmental clearance, and do an investment grade, kind of a more detailed ridership and revenue analysis. And then step 2 would be the implementation phase. So this is actually finishing up design, getting the right-of-way, and constructing it. So we released the RFP for this in November of 2022, and intentionally had a long RFP process. So this was the time to meet with different partners, proposers, and really talk through with them what this system could look like. So really tried to have it be an engaging process to make sure this was something that could be delivered. and to get kind of more creative on the proposal front. And then the proposals were submitted June 2023. So we received one proposal after that process, and that was from East County Connection Partners, ECCP, and that included Plenary as the developer, Glideways as the technology, Flatiron as the contractor, Circle Point for environmental clearance, and InfraStrategies on funding strategies. So the authority awarded the contract in July of 2023, and the Tri-Delta board in June of 2023, and the notice to proceed to the development team was given in November of 2023. So current status, as I said, we're nearing the end of phase one of that step one. So this was going through actually identifying this initial segment, looking at the costs around that, identifying the technology, and then coming forward with a plan to take it to the next step. We're right now reviewing, the staff is reviewing that, and that's what I'll come back in a couple months with, is that feasibility study. And then the next step would be the boards approve the document and then authorize to proceed to the next step, which is the phase two is the next step. So looking at that kind of graphically, you can see where we are here with the red arrow. If we come back in July and get approval on the phase one feasibility study, we're looking at about 10 months to get through phase two to identify funding and also the environmental scoping. Then we would go to phase three, which is contingent on finding that funding. And that would put us at September 2027 for actually going into construction with revenue service starting in 2030. So that's kind of the big picture timeline on that. So while this is going on, the technology has also been worked on. So this is the current glide car, or at least the most current picture I have of it. So again, this is a purpose-built vehicle traveling on a dedicated guideway, right? So this is not a retrofitted car that has a steering wheel. It's really optimized for traveling on as kind of as optimized of a guideway as you can. And this is what some of you may have seen out at the test facility in Richmond. Speaking of which, the initial testing of this technology was happening out at Gomentum at Concord Naval Weapons. Since then, they have moved to Hilltop Mall in Richmond, and they have a big facility that they're building out there. It's going to eventually be over a mile of dedicated guideway, and they've got maintenance facilities for the vehicles out there, training and a demonstration control center out there, and the first rides on this system they're expecting to give in the fall of this year, and then full build out of the dedicated guideway, the mile track, the full track that you see here, by mid-2026. So as we've kind of been looking at the specific case in East County, they've also been developing their technology and working on that in Contra Costa County. So with that, that's really the end of my presentation. Again, I'll be back in a couple months to present the feasibility study and look for board action. But for tonight, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions or comments from the authority board? Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. So just to confirm, so we're looking at Glideways right now, and Glideways only, their vehicles only operate on their guideway, right? So there's nothing on a regular roadway. Just want to make that clear.
The only stipulation was that that these vehicles could operate on a roadway if someday there was a need to do that, that they are built to the standards that would allow them to operate on a roadway.
Okay, but it's my understanding after talking to the Glideways folks that they are not intending to do so. And they have projects elsewhere. You know, they're looking at a project down in San Jose and one in Atlanta. So all of their vehicles right now will be operating. And so if they have to cross the road, they go over the road or they go under the road.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah, and this is envisioned as a completely grade separated
Right.
project. it was just a stipulation so that we didn't kind of box ourselves in if someday it's.
I understand, but as it stands now,
Yes.
this is what we're looking at. Thank you.
Commissioner Stepper, did you have a,
Oh, I'm sorry. No, thank you.
Commissioner Burgess?
Yeah, so, so much of the technology that we are looking at has been with the assumption that there's going to be grants and funding related to environmental benefits, electrification, all of that. With the changes in the federal government, do we anticipate still being able to do these things within the timeline that we're doing? And then the other question I have is, you know, it's such a long runway as far as partners. Sometimes, you know, they're ready to go, and then things change and things. So do we have a plan to be able to bring another partner in if one is not able to continue to participate? Two really easy to answer questions.
So I'll speak to the first question first. In terms of grant funding, I mean, we're still seeing grants come out for low and no emission vehicles currently. But we do think, and Tim can speak more to this, but I think in terms of there could be a pivot more towards the private development side in terms of looking to fund more public-private partnerships. So we think it's a good, well-positioned for that. The funding plan we're going to really kind of dig into, especially in the next phase. Also looking at private partnering opportunities like with development potentially, or with commercial centers. Would they have money to put into this too, or getting creative around that? So still feel pretty good about being able to, well, we will be looking at in detail on how to get this funding, yeah. And then to the second question, I mean, right now the development team is what it is, and so we're expecting that they can come through on the project. I think, yeah, we'd have to think about what kind of the backup plan would be if that happened.
Things are just so fluid right now that it's just nice to know that we, you know, are able to pivot if we need to.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the first question. So what, you know, based on the meetings that we've been having in DC, obviously the new administration, but also the new leadership that's being placed within like FTA and like USDOT, they are highly interested in autonomous vehicles and also really exploring new and different business models for transit. Like, they're not interested in the current business model of transit. They're really so like, for example, you know, the deputy administrator for FTA, you know, specifically said that the low-no grant, like rather than going after like low-no emissions, like they're specifically looking for like low-no and new technology projects, like specifically like glideways or even like an autonomous shuttle or beep or whatever. And so this administration is going, I mean, based on what we're seeing with like Jonathan Morrison being the, you know, not unconfirmed NHTSA administrator, as well, you know, NHTSA as well as FTA, what we're hearing is that there's going to be a lot of movement in this autonomous vehicle space. So there's already, for example, like on the Senate Commerce, Senator Loomis is already proposing an AV bill already that's going to be coming out soon. And then also there's going to be a big focus on AV and the highway reauthorization. And so there's just going to be a lot of focus on these technology. And I think relative to these purpose-built type of shuttles, we're going to see a lot of movement in terms of the regulatory framework and the regulations and rulemaking under this like current administration.
So you said something that kind of created more questions. They don't like the current model of public transit. So this looks like public transit. How is this different from public transit?
So, I mean, in terms of like, and we'll present more of this in in the feasibility study, and I think in the next presentation, but I think what we're learning from this business model is, one, it's a public-private partnership,
Right.
and also the fare box recovery is literally flipped upside down.
What does that mean?
So right now, typically, public transit subsidized anywhere from 90%, 90%,
Right.
90%. We're looking at potentially like anywhere from like a 20 to 30% subsidy on this.
So riders would pay 20 to 30%, is that what you're saying?
No. So like the fare box recovery,
So
right?
70 to 80%.
70, 80% fare box recovery, right? Right now on current public transit, you're only getting 10% fare box recovery.
Okay.
So it's mainly because of it's the technology, the demand.
Yeah.
Right? And so what the administration's looking for are these new business models in public transit.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Brunel?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Ryan. So I noticed on the maps, the proposed routes, the one through Antioch goes past a train station that's been decommissioned. So will there be an opportunity to look at those routes again and make sure that they coincide with whatever's going to be happening in 2030?
For sure. That map was the original feasibility study map from 2021. So what's happened since then is actually identified the initial feasible route that takes into consideration the current land use and everything. But yeah, I'll bring that back and can see that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Unrich?
Thanks. I was just going to add that this was kind of a unique opportunity, and it's not really us funding it. That's why it's a public-private partnership. And they are in it because they see a revenue model that makes it work. And by having it in a public-private partnership, it reduces the cost substantially. You know, if government touches construction, as you know, you being the administrator, it's 200 to 300, 400% more construction cost. It just is. And it takes 3 times as long. And no different than what we're doing in San Ramon on a design-build project for the bridge. This is the same thing. It just happens to be with new technologies, but we have outs all the way along the way. Right? If it doesn't work and it doesn't meet everybody's needs, the technology is proving itself, if you've seen it, and they have sold other systems to other people. So we're much closer than I think we ever thought we would be because the technology is proving out. And it's the most cost-effective way right now. You know, we did E-BART. Why? Because it was a lot cheaper than traditional BART. It's cheaper to run, it's cheaper to maintain, and it was considerably cheaper to build. This is even the next step because basically it's a 5-foot asphalt, 2 concrete curbs, and no infrastructure. So the infrastructure is portable because it's built into the cars. And I think it is probably what we're all going to have to look to because the cost of providing public services is rising faster than revenues. We're going to have to look at these types. And I think of all places where they have contracts like San Jose, ours will get built first. Why? Because we have the right of way. We have the ability to do it. And it makes sense there. They're doing it for a whole lot of other reasons, and their obstacles to get between point A and point B are worse than San Francisco when they tried to bury BART for 20 years below the ground. So this is probably if it was a win-win situation, we're pretty close to that. But we do have these checkpoints to make sure that we as an agency and our taxpayers are not going to be unnecessarily burdened. And so that's the risk that they're taking on their side. So the development and all that cost, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to get to that point. And if it works, we get that benefit. So.
Another
Yes.
Commissioner Oldbringer?
Thank you. So I just had some questions about, okay, so they're making all these investments, the public-private partnership, but how does that work so that this service, I mean, it's being established to be permanent, it sounds like, so how would that continue into perpetuity? And my other question is, are there any groups out there that don't like this that, you know, could potentially sue to stop progress? Like maybe is there a group that doesn't like or feels jobs are being taken away or something, that, they don't see the positive benefits, because we've talked about all the positive things here, so I guess I'm looking for like the weaknesses.
Yeah, great question. So we're looking at a couple different operational models, and that'll also be part of the feasibility study. But this is something that the development team doesn't want to operate this long-term or anything. They're designing this so that it can be part of the transit system. That could mean Tri-Delta is operating this. And then, workforce development is, of course, part of this. So there is still going to be jobs associated with this in terms of the maintenance and operations. And developing that workforce would be part of this. So upskilling, reskilling existing transit operators.
And so just as a quick follow-up, so if this is going to become part of the transit system, so then did I hear you say that it would have to sustain itself, though, through the fare box in order for it to continue?
Yeah, well, and we're looking at different ways to do that. So if there's private funding opportunities, tying it into a development or something where that's part of the mitigation is that this gets there. We've got the Shared Mobility Hubs project as well that's looking at how do we generate revenue at these hubs and bringing Glideways into that hub and then generating revenue from, the coffee shop or whatever. We have another project that's looking at how to basically privately fund those as well. So this is going to require some creative funding ideas, but yeah, the idea is that it would be in perpetuity, and a lot of that it becomes a public asset. It still becomes a public asset. And then I think I didn't answer your second question in terms of groups. I don't believe that we have heard from other groups that have pushed back on this, but I don't know if that's been the case. Didn't want it to sound like I was ignoring your question.
Vice Chair Gee.
Thanks, Ryan. So I have two questions. The first is, so the ridership analysis, has it already been done, or is it not fully done until the environmental process?
So there has been ridership studies done even back to the original feasibility study and kind of carried through this because that's got to be part of the feasibility study. And I'll get into those numbers when I present the new feasibility study in a couple months. But yeah, it's showing that that there's a huge benefit to the existing transit systems, especially bringing more people to the BART system through this, and as well as when we get a lot more of these stations. Like if eBART, say, was extended, you'd have a couple stations with that. The idea is to have 6 or 7 stations in this initial segment. So you're really capturing a much larger walkshed within each of those stations.
And then my second question was looking at your stages and steps here. So it's not until the pre-development agreement, the phase 3, where you're going to have the full-blown financial analysis and the long-term operational projections?
Correct. So we're going to look for funding to get to that phase 3 where all that happens. Okay. But it's probably going to be 2 steps of funding as well, right? Like fund that getting through 30% and design clearance and doing the detailed ridership and revenue forecasts, and then use that to go get funding to build this.
So at this point right now, there's no real detail of anything, right? This is as I well know, this is a public-private, fishing expedition to see if this can all work out, right? And if it can, great. But there has to be money that the private side's going to get paid back, or it's not going to work in the long run.
Correct. I mean, there's a financial model where they're putting up front money and getting paid back. But I still think there's some other private partnership funding possibilities with this project, which would actually provide more long-term revenue, that's a study that would happen in phase 2 as well.
And are you talking about private from some source other than the delivery entity or the development entity?
Yes. So that would be the shared mobility hubs that we're looking at, where you're actually providing services at those hubs to bring money in, development as it happens, really looking at, because this is going to cost money. And so figuring out how that's sustainable and where that money all comes together is to be figured out.
And it's to be figured out by the work done by the development team.
Correct.
Yeah, a big part of this new business model we're looking at is really focused on asset monetization. So it's not just focusing on just fare box recovery and just, it's really focused on how do you leverage the entire system, through, as you're basically expanding and extending glideways, and you're creating all these like different stops, right? And so at those stops, how are we leveraging, potential revenue streams at those stops, through either, development opportunities, advertising opportunities, or through the shared mobility hubs, through like bike share and like all these other, revenue opportunities that we're looking at the full business model and really focusing on asset monetization.
Commissioner Honridge?
I would just add, one of the other things this does, because the timing, the reason why it's moving along now, as you know, in approximately 2028, we are looking at to go out and get a reauthorization of the measure. This will help guide us in what should be in the measure, what shouldn't be. If for some reason the economics don't work out on this, it could be still an EBARD extension. It could be one of those. We know what that cost. The opportunity in this case is that it was a much lower cost, which means we could do more and touch more communities than we probably could, and we'd have many more stations. So it's the right time to do it. We got to stay on the schedule that you've presented so we can look at it and make that decision, informed decision, when we get to that point.
And
Commissioner Burgess?
And, just looking at this, I think of the other types of transit models that we've seen in other parts of the world, where these kind of developments can have other types of development like housing and retail. Is that also a part of this? Okay. So that's part of the paying for it as well.
Yeah, that's the development opportunities. But I think it's also important to look at this, like we're looking at it as a system. So it's how do we bring in these new technologies to bring more riders into the public transit system? So like if we're bringing in through first and last mile shuttles, or on-demand systems or glideway systems, like how are we really complementing and integrating these into the system to improve ridership even on our existing buses, right? To improve ridership in the system. So as we're really looking at this first and last mile, we're really trying to feed the system, not necessarily compete with it, right? We're trying to, by then bringing in more riders, we're increasing fare box across the entire system, and it gives us more opportunities to leverage that fare box throughout the entire system as well. So it's really about complementing the existing public transit system.
Aaron, may I just ask a quick question?
Representative Worth?
Thank you, sir. You talked earlier about we talked a lot about fare box return. That was one of the challenges of high-speed rail, the feasibility of the kind of fare box return that would be required to sustain the system. So you talked about a percentage. How would that, in the modeling, the preliminary modeling that's being done, what number are you looking at per ride? What are they suggesting?
Yeah, and that's what we're working through in the feasibility study right now. But I believe we're in the range of, $4 to $10 or something like that.
So that's a significant number when you compare it to you would add that on then. If I'm just thinking of the nuts and bolts of how you're going to, the incentive of getting people onto this system. If you're linking into a system like BART or you're linking into a bus system, that seems like a pretty significant add-on.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're looking towards the lower end of that. And then the system is pretty flexible. So back to the shared ride or private ride. So you would be able to have a shared ride where you sit down in the car and then 3 people join you. And that would be a cheaper ride. If you want your own vehicle, then that's going to be more expensive. So I think there's a lot of flexibility kind of built into that. And then you're almost, the idea is also that it's point to point. So you hop in and you go directly to your destination as opposed to stopping at each stop along the ways. That's kind of part of the design too. So if you want to get to the spot quick, and probably getting too much into the feasibility piece of this, but then you potentially pay more, right? And then you go straight to your destination, or it matches you up with others that are also going to that destination. So there's.
Commissioner Obringer.
Sorry, when I heard about getting paired up with strangers, I immediately thought of public safety. So is that being taken into account? Because I'm just thinking, as a woman and getting into one of these by myself with a stranger, and, BART, it's definitely improving, but there have been a lot of safety challenges. So what is being analyzed there so people of all ages, genders, et cetera, can feel comfortable riding by themselves?
Yeah,
or with a stranger, I guess I should say, in like this enclosed system.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's fully monitored the whole time, so that's kind of the one answer. And the guideway is monitored externally from the vehicle as well along the entire length. So a lot of that is being taken into consideration. And then also you do have the option to ride by yourself. So that's, except in I'll just leave it at that. You have the option to ride alone in the vehicle, which was important as one of the original criteria that this system would meet.
Because you think somebody's coming after you.
Yeah,
it's a good system.
Commissioner Stepper.
Just to make a comment on how fast everything is changing right now, because I'm also on the Valley Link board, and it's amazing that you can have such major changes, and the faster you can move here, the better, because I was thinking you were farther along than you are, perhaps. And already it's looking at a big change in what kind of fuel it's using, how far it's going. I'm talking about Valley Link now. This is, for those of you in the audience that don't know, this is going over the Altamont Pass to bring people to work here from the Central Valley in 1928 to begin. So heard that number.
2028?
Oh, well, that would be difficult, wouldn't it?
It was probably horses back then.
But we'll get credit for that. And going at the speed of BART, et cetera. And so there's a lot of things that have changed in the last few weeks. And one of those is that, like, batteries are going to be large enough shortly now. They'll take them up and over hills that we didn't think they could make, and the changes in what kind of fuel are being done. And I'm not going to give you that report. Kevin Sheridan can come here and do that. I'd just encourage you that speed is really important, because as soon as you turn around, there's something else on the horizon. So good job on what you're doing. Thank you.
Okay, I assume no more comments. Are there any public comments? Terry Ann?
We have received no public comments. We have none written or verbal.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. The next item is an action item under the Planning Committee to be presented by Matt Kelly, seeking approval of the draft 2050 blueprint for the Contra Costa Comprehensive Countywide Transportation Plan.
Thank you, Chair Meadows. Good evening, committee members. Matt Kelly, Principal Transportation Planner with the Authority. I'm here with Carrie Modi from Fair and Piers. We are here to present an update on the countywide transportation plan. You may remember we were here just last month giving you an update on the plan and kind of previewing what we would be talking to you about. We gave you an update on the outreach we performed around the county at the 4 RTPCs regarding our CTP Blueprint 2050. That is the focus of tonight's conversation. What we're going to do is walk you through the blueprint, some of the strategies and principles that are part of that. The goal tonight is to have you approve the blueprint for inclusion in the development of the CTP and blueprint, which will go on the remainder of this year and into early next year. And really, by approving the blueprint tonight, we are really asking for your buy-in on the contents of the blueprint, and that's what Carrie is going to walk you through tonight. We're also following up from last month with a breakdown of some of the responses we heard when we did our public outreach, broken down by the subregions, so how people responded to the strategies and principles, by each of the 4 subregions, so you can kind of get a flavor for what each part of the county is thinking. I'm going to stop talking now and turn it over to Carrie. She'll walk you through, and just keep in mind the goal tonight is to achieve your buy-in on the blueprint, so we have a foundation and policy guidance and a framework for moving forward with the CTP. So Carrie.
Thanks, Matt. Good evening, commissioners. Okay, so Matt queued us up here. Again, our purpose here tonight is to get that buy-in from you all for having the 2050 blueprint really serve as the foundation for the CTP and the business plan. We're also here tonight to answer any questions that you may have on the blueprint itself. So what I'll go through is primarily, I'll give you a little bit of background information on the engagement and principles, but we'll spend a little bit more time specifically tonight on the strategies to make sure you're clear on what's included under each of the principles in the blueprint. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps after that. So the blueprint really is the foundation of the CTP. That is why this is really important, and we're looking for your action on that this evening. It's intended to also streamline the development of the CTP by, again, having that clarified policy direction set at this point in time. And then it also will establish the approach for engagement and some of the technical analysis that CCTA will conduct as part of the CTP too. So this is really just trying to queue up the next phase of the countywide transportation plan as well as the business plan. There was a lot of broad engagement that was done in the first phase. So had over 2,260 people complete the online survey. You'll see some of the results of that survey reflected in tonight's presentation to get a little bit more of a sense of what people are thinking about some of the blueprint strategies in specific. So there's 4 principles, and I know many of you or most of you have seen this slide before, that guide the CTP and the business plan are really the core of the blueprint itself. The first is safe travel, that traveling in my community is safe and comfortable no matter how I get around. The second is access for all, that you can shape and access transportation projects and programs that improve your community. Livable and connected neighborhoods, and it says that I have a convenient and comfortable options for how I travel to places that are important to me. And then lastly, growing sustainably, which is the idea that I feel confident that transportation investments in Contra Costa will help provide a sustainable future for my community. And over 80% of respondents countywide supported the 4 principles. So really broad support on that. And that's either people supporting or strongly agreeing with the statement. That's what we mean there. And that was also true when we kind of broke it down by the different subregions within the county as well. So you can see kind of from central to east, to Lamorinda, Tri-Valley, and West County, we really do have a broad range of support. There's some minor variation within that, but it is largely reflective of strong support across the county. And I just want to kind of cue you into some icons that you'll see later today in the presentation as you jump into the strategies. So first is that there's just a numbering scheme. That's the top bar here. You'll see a star icon next to some of the strategies. That indicates that was selected by a high percentage of survey respondents as one of their top 3 priorities. So that indicates that it was really a top priority strategy for them. And then the bottom icon with the IDEA logo is a strategy that was added as a result of community or stakeholder engagement. So a more recent addition to the blueprint draft as well. So just wanted to orient you to that, because there's a lot of information contained in the subsequent slides. So we'll start with the first principle, which is safe travel. Again, this is really aiming to eliminate fatal and severe injury collisions on Contra Costa roads. The first strategy, which received one of the highest, or that kind of high category of priority from survey respondents, is that you'll prioritize streets and crossings with the highest likelihood of fatal and severe injury collisions. And so this is really about kind of following through on a lot of the Vision Zero work that CCTA has already done. This could be looking at things like aligning funding, for example, with some of the high injury network or other planning tools that CCTA has already developed. The second strategy under safety is implement safer streets with context-sensitive speed limits countywide and enforce, if and when allowed, through speed cameras. The third strategy is advancing safe street design principles with a focus on vulnerable populations, such as seniors, people walking and biking, and children within school zones. This was another top priority item identified through the survey. The fourth is fostering partnerships and providing safety training to local agencies. This was something that came out through some of the conversations with the different board members through the community engagement and stakeholder engagement. The fifth strategy is incorporating safety improvements into all project types. So that could look like guidelines to help support and make sure that there's a safety component into the various projects that CCTA is looking at and funding. That was another top priority item. The next strategy is enhancing vehicle safety to benefit everyone traveling on Contra Costa roads, including through connected and autonomous vehicles. So connecting back to some of the information we saw in the previous presentation. That was one that was also added through stakeholder engagement. Improving crash response capabilities and supporting collision data sharing. And then ensuring that all travelers in Contra Costa feel safe and can travel without harm. The second principle is focused on livable and connected communities, livable and connected neighborhoods, and this is really focusing on creating multimodal networks that is really integrated with placemaking. So making sure that our transportation system is really responsive to those places that make Contra Costa so special. The first strategy is to clarify needs on major streets and support their implementation consistently countywide. The next strategy is to construct countywide, connected, and comfortable walking and bicycling networks, including regional trails. This was also a top priority item selected by survey respondents. This could look like, for example, building out the All Ages and Abilities Network that's included in the CCTA Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. Partnering with transit agencies to advance high-quality, reliable, connected, and efficient transit service with transit improvements prioritized in the access improvement zones was another top priority strategy identified by survey respondents. And then implementing transit speed and reliability projects along transit priority corridors was also added during the process. So you can see here a theme of kind of making sure that that there's good coordination with the ITP and that some of those projects are really pushed through with the CTP blueprint as well. Adding a strategy of improving the transit customer experience through real-time information, wayfinding, integrated trip planning, travel training, and consistent fare policy. This was another one that came up through the context of stakeholder engagement. Enabling a seamless travel experience across modes, including through shared mobility hubs that enhance transportation access. Focused transportation investments to support economic development priorities. And then lastly in this section, retain and invest in key industrial lands. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a few more here. Then modernizing goods movement through freight transportation that is safe, reliable, efficient, and sustainable. Supporting the transformation of underutilized shopping malls and office parks into vibrant neighborhoods. This was also something that came up through the stakeholder engagement. Connecting Contra Costa with its neighbors. This was another priority item that came through in the survey. And harnessing current data assets through digital infrastructure investments. The next principle is access for all. This is really about expanding access for underserved residents, including older adults, youth, and people with disabilities. So the strategies here are really focused on ensuring the voices and needs of all communities, including underserved groups, and making sure that they're really represented throughout the planning process. The second strategy is expanding access for older adults, youth, and people with disabilities. This is also something that received a lot of survey support and sense of priority. Investing in multimodal transportation infrastructure and transportation services in underserved communities. Offering transportation assistance programs to low-income communities was also a top priority. And then on to the fourth principle here on growing sustainably. The first is to expand clean vehicle initiatives and zero-emission charging infrastructure to accelerate the transition to a zero-emission future and really improve air quality in underserved communities. The second strategy is to plan, design, and maintain a climate-resilient transportation system. This is something that came up through the stakeholder engagement. Planning for emergency access and multimodal evacuation in response to climate change without compromising everyday safety. Maintaining urban growth boundaries in alignment with the growth management program. This was another top priority item from survey respondents. Managing roadway congestion without building wide roadways. Supporting compact housing, mixed-use development, and parking management near transit and in areas prioritized for growth to reduce the need to drive alone and promote thriving places. This was another one that was a top priority for survey respondents. Expanding transportation demand management programs that limit the need to drive alone and include commute vehicle trip reduction and mode shift programs at major employers. This also came out during stakeholder engagement. And exploring options for programs to consistently mitigate potential transportation impacts from new development, which was another one that came out through stakeholder engagement. Establishing urban greening programs in communities was another one that received top priority from survey respondents. Effectively managing the supply of parking and curb space to minimize circling and idling and support local businesses was another one that came through in the stakeholder engagement. And then adopting a data governance policy also came through in the stakeholder conversations. And then as we kind of close out here, I just wanted to share a few other highlights from the survey that I spoke about earlier, just to give you kind of a sense of where people are coming from. So while driving alone is really the most common way that people get around on a daily or frequent basis, that was 73% of respondents. So we know that most people really do drive to get around. But I think one of the interesting findings from this survey is that many respondents also really rely on non-driving modes as well on a daily or even frequent basis. So 39% of survey respondents walk on a daily or frequent basis, 23% take transit, 19% carpool, and 15% bicycle. So there's really a substantial portion of folks who are not driving for many of the trips on a very regular basis. And many more report that they do want to use non-driving modes that much more often. And so I think this in particular was really notable. 2/3 of respondents would consider taking transit, really substantial number. Almost the same amount would consider a driverless shuttle. About 60% would consider driverless taxi, and in the 40th percentile, 47% would consider walking, and 44% would consider bike or scooter shares. So a lot of interest as well in kind of diversifying how people get around. There were also a lot of really important findings that came through with the stakeholder engagement, both from the RTPCs, the advisory committee, and then local agency priorities, and so wanted to highlight a few here. The first is that really a lot of local agencies are really wanting active collaboration really between CCTA and themselves, with CCTA really being a kind of leader and coordinator and advisor to both cities and transit operators, and making sure that they're kind of that connection point to how this work gets moved forward. They also wanted to make sure that there was consideration of sub-regional contexts and needs. That was an important thing that we heard through stakeholder engagement. So that there's really enough kind of context sensitivity built into these policies so that it really feels like it reflects the different areas of the county. Traffic congestion, not surprisingly, especially school-related traffic congestion, was a big theme in what we heard, as was the needs for safety and all over. So hearing about issues for speeding and reckless driving being a really common refrain. Desire to see investments in transit service and really make sure that they're strong, safe and accessible first and last mile connections was important. Economic development was also really important to people, making sure that there's access to commercial districts as well as jobs. And then wanting to really see an incorporation of evacuation emergency planning and roadway design. So needing to make sure that we're kind of holding those emergency scenario planning efforts in our head as these policies are being established. And then lastly, wanting to make sure that the programs included in the blueprint really continue to support the mobility of seniors, youth, and underserved communities. So next steps for the blueprint, the May board workshop that y'all are participating in next week is really focused on how to advance this. So really kind of pivoting from this policy phase to talking about really what the how and the what of what this is. So starting to talk about the specific transformative visions for transportation in Contra Costa, the approach to identifying projects that really best advance these visions too. So how to kind of go about doing that and what that approach should be. And then what are the measures of success for implementation and those long-term outcomes that Contra Costa is looking for? So some exciting kind of different topics that'll be tackled in that retreat and really kind of starting to pivot point into the CTP phase. That also coincides with the next phase of public engagement on the CTP, which will begin in June here in a few weeks. I won't reiterate this, but just I think at this point, just happy to take any questions that you all have.
Are there any questions or comments from the authority board? Commissioner Obringer?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So I saw a tiny bullet point about reducing congestion and school traffic, and I think that the program that is down in Danville in that area is remarkable and wonderful. Traffic's. And we have looked at it before at Transpac, and for a variety of complicated reasons, we have not been able to replicate it. But is this something that anybody has looked into? Because, and I will get on my soapbox for a moment, because I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and up until my senior year in high school, I could take the school bus, right? I mean, it's like parents didn't have to worry about dropping their kids off. It was a different century, I know, it was a different time. But the point is, that having lived here in Contra Costa for over 20 years now, it just blows my mind that parents have to, I don't know how they do it, right? Like dropping kids off in the morning, picking them up, all the emissions, all the constant complaints I get from constituents about speeding parents. I mean, where is that in this? Or is it? And if it's not, can we put it in there somehow? And maybe nobody else agrees with me, but this is something I constantly hear about.
I agree with you on that one, definitely.
Yeah, and that sentiment has been echoed, throughout, I think, different forms of engagement. And I think that is something that very interested in taking a closer look at. And because, I mean, to your point, like that really is if we could get kind of more of those parents who are currently having to drop off their kids because there's not another option, kind of off the road, off to work, doing what they need to be doing, those kids on the bus, that really reduces a lot of traffic congestion. So that reduces travel times, that reduces emissions, and it improves safety as well, because that's less kind of vehicles, around those very sensitive areas near the schools where some kids are going to be walking and biking too. So it really kind of does a lot with that.
Just wanted to note, you will see that as part of the presentation at next Thursday's board workshop. There is specific information on really what to do around schools, and busing is part of that. We aren't getting into the projects today. We will talk about next week about conceptual types of projects that you may see coming out of the CTP, and that certainly is one of them.
I also rode the school bus in a previous century. Commissioner Burgess?
Yeah, one of my aspirations, particularly in East County, and I was on my little soapbox the last time talking about how we're still catching up with the infrastructure and all that, but I think that there are enough people moving into this area that have had those kind of experiences that are easily adapting to public transit. And I think that we have an opportunity with our younger people to become public transit oriented. And so, I think when we can make it easy, when we can make it safe for parents to have confidence, for kids to feel confident, that's a really long-term so many ripples of types of benefits that I think that's really something we should be focusing on.
Commissioner Stepper?
Just a quick follow-up with the traffics program. It's not just the parents that we're talking about. It's all of the older kids that are filling up our buses. We need 2 more buses that we don't even have right now because there's 54 kids on the high school buses. And that's where the waiting list is, surprisingly. Those are future real transit riders. And they, you know, at a certain point, they take their siblings too. Thanks.
Commissioner Onrich?
Well, thank you for the presentation. 2 things. One's a question, simple one. Tri-Valley? Where's Tri-Valley? It's listed everywhere. So you have 5 reasons. I kind of think I know what you're doing, but there's no Tri-Valley in Contra Costa County.
That's
Referenced.
correct. Yeah, we were trying to separate out.
I think you mean San Ramon Valley. So we ought to be literal because for those of us that live in that area, that's actually way south of us. We're part of it, but that means Livermore. And if we're going to refer to our area, it would help that people know what we're talking about because we, La Miranda, pull lower in some areas. So that's why we had a traffics program in the last measure. We chose to get our share, and that's where we put all our money. And it's a congestion relief agency. So one, I would make that change throughout, label it, because I know where every other area is except for Tri-Valley, so.
Yeah, we took liberties with SWAT on this one, and it should be noted, it is the Contra Costa portion of the Tri-Valley, which is the San Ramon Valley.
So let's just call it San Ramon
Yeah,
Valley.
okay.
It's, because that includes all of the other areas. So we have Central, that includes Alamo, Diablo, Danville, and San Ramon.
Blackhawk, yeah.
That is the San.
That's right. Yeah, we can make that change for
Well,
sure.
and maybe have a footnote, and I don't mean to interrupt, but just have a footnote somewhere defining that because it does involve some major unincorporated areas that have been mentioned, which are Alamo, Diablo, Blackhawk, Danville, San Ramon, which are all part of Tri-Valley Transportation Council, the TVTC, but Tri-Valley we use a lot down there for Innovate Tri-Valley, lots of things that go into Alameda County. So even though you're saying Contra Costa portion, I agree. I think it's better that, and then just have a footnote defining it, because I think, but, and even La Miranda, someplace have that footnote, Lafayette, Moraga, Orinda, because while we all know what La Miranda is, there may be someone out in East County who has no idea what La Miranda is. So, and I'm not just saying people in East County don't know what's going on, Diane. That wasn't.
I know what it is.
I grew up in Lafayette, so, you know.
You're taking my win. The reason why I'm saying, having been through those before and helping market, it's not important where, if you live in East County, you know what it is. That is not the message. We need to make sure, because where we made the mistake before is, if you're referring to an area that the people who live in that area know, nobody cares about Tri-Valley. But we also want to inform that it means San Ramon Valley because that way those people, it's their voice that's being heard. So we did it in that we've just, I don't know where this came up. Not a liberty, it doesn't exist. There is no Tri-Valley in Contra Costa County. So,
And even East County can be defined differently depending on who you're talking to.
Commissioner Kelly?
can add a map
We have
for
official maps that show the
my
subregions.
questions? I was in the middle of asking a question. Could I finish? Is that too? Well, no, I just said one thing, and we want to, the question that I have, and that there are some polling numbers that are low, and they portend a problem. And when you look at growing sustainability, I think there's two items that, there's landmines that are there, but I think we should be a little careful about. And while everybody, has had that thoughts, first of all, they're politically charged. I would just say that some of those, like, almost 1 and 2 per se, I would just consider simplifying this and making the message a little bit clearer and not so aspirational, that I think it might serve us better. That's just my opinion. I'm just worried that there are 2 areas, and I'm in one of them, that's going to hurt us. Yeah, well, it's just, what they're trying to tell us in this is, by the way, for all of these principles, right? And they're pretty much talking to groups of people that are somewhat transit-oriented. You can tell by the upper charts. But when you look at support for a principle, I'm on page 14. Principle, growing sustainability, that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those show up in La Miranda and Tri-Valley, San Ramon Valley, lower. And we're the ones that actually ended up being really low last time on all those areas. So I'm just saying, it is signifying, even with people that are in transit, it's showing that there's a low polling. And in the real world, these aren't polling numbers, these are just, it's gonna present that. We know those numbers in those areas for some of those things might be weak. And I'm just saying, because it's such politically charged right now, you know, we might want to, and particularly 1 and 2, it's great, you know, we're doing this, we're transportation planners, transit, and picking transit solutions. I'm just worried that we should be a little cautious there, that's all.
And so that's specifically in reference to, for example, saying that the San Ramon Valley supports the growing sustainability principle, but kind of 77% of respondents.
I'm just taking note that those percentages of what people are also are going to reflect, but those numbers will be lower in every case. And it's proved it thank you, it's proved it in the past as well. So just a concern.
Noted, thank you.
Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, thank you. I also grew up riding the school bus. But I want to make a comment about that.
In a previous century.
In a previous life, in a previous century. You know, it all depends on where you live. I can tell you out in West County, where I live, and Hercules maybe in Pinole, not all the kids go to the public school. In fact, a lot of kids do not. They go into Berkeley, they go to San Francisco, they may go to some public schools, they go to some private schools, some Catholic schools, there may be special schools, and that's just kind of the reality, particularly in an area. If you live in a place where the schools are really great, yeah, a lot of kids go there and maybe those schools have resources. But in other places that may not happen, so that's a challenge. Likewise, in terms of taking transit, I will take transit when I can, when it takes me to a place where I need to go to, you know, like maybe into San Francisco, occasionally from Hercules into Berkeley. But when I come over here, it would take me 2.5 times my driving time to get here to this meeting from my city, so I don't take transit. So it all depends on where we go. We have this big bay in the middle, we have all these hills, you know, it's like we're not a flat area. So I'm going to be really interested to see what the projects are that we come up with. And one more thing on my soapbox, I'm really holding hope in the future for speed cameras, particularly for reckless driving, because that a lot of people just don't want to stop, and they don't really care. You know, they just want to get to where they're going, and that's what causes accidents.
Representative Anderson.
Yes, thank you. I've really enjoyed reviewing this as well. Some things jump out at me. I really liked LC2, although I would love to highlight it even further, which is where we're talking about countywide connected walking, bicycling networks, including regional trails. And of course, my pet project is the bifurcation of the Iron Horse Trail, and we're hopefully moving forward with that project, at least from Bollinger to Crow Canyon. But somehow we need to integrate the issue even further of safety. The big issue in the San Ramon Valley and other parts is kids on e-bikes that aren't really e-bikes, and that have throttles, and that are in essence terrorizing people on trails. And so somehow we need to those are some things that resonate with people because they love their trails. They kind of like the idea of bifurcation, but when you talk about something going fast on the Iron Horse Trail or any other walking trail, it makes them nervous. But, you know, talking about safety enforcement. I also love that you talked a little bit, too, about the sort of evacuation routes, so to speak. I mean, that is such a high thing on so many cities, particularly La Miranda cities right now, of Diablo, Blackhawk area. How do we get out in emergency? How do we access fire trails, fire roads, things like that. So there are a lot of issues that I think we're going to want to continue to poll and highlight as being very important to people. And maybe, when this goes out to a vote, 3 years from now, there will be different top issues. I think we've got them in here, but it's really going to be, there's so much in here. We're going to need to, as we even roll out the plan and present it to cities, highlight but listen to what the cities are saying out of this, of what's really going to impact them and what they're hearing from their constituents.
Vice Chair Gee.
Thank you. I was, just like Supervisor Anderson said, I was very happy to see what was captured in here on the evacuation, because that's all Matt hears when he comes to SWAT, right? So, but the part I'm a little concerned about is that it's under the growing sustainable area, whereas I think it would, I'm not saying it's bad for it to be there, but I wish it was also more prominent in the safety area. Maybe there's a way to manipulate that or add that or rephrase that so that it does kind of come across as one of the things, because I think if you're somebody in the county that's worried about evacuation, you don't immediately think, oh, I should look under growing sustainably. You want to look under safety, right? So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, first of all, thank you for that presentation. I know that a lot has gone into gathering information, and a lot of people who come to the workshops are interested in transportation planning. And one of the things I think we really have to focus on, and we've learned a lot during the COVID about how people use streets and roads and in their communities and how they commute, and our transit numbers are really significant in terms of transit ridership has restored to its pre-pandemic levels. And moving students from home to school is really a critical issue for communities, for parents. And I think it might be helpful to take this plan and focus it, and I think Newell has brought up some very good points about some of the focuses, that the way they're raised, is to really focus on the individual resident in this county and how they're getting from home to work, their children are getting from home to school and back, and what tools they need, what resources they use to travel. Because, 10 years ago, we were talking about the, planned dense developments in downtown. Well, those are issues now where we're hearing from our communities, particularly in the high fire zones, that people are very concerned about that. But they're struggling every day to get from home to work, getting their kids to school, and how do we want to make their life better? Because they're going to be focusing on how is my life today. And so when we start talking about how we present these ideas to people, you want to do that in a way that is really focused. I think, as Supervisor Anderson said, when you're out talking to the cities, talking to communities. The other thing that's, I think, given the fact that we're looking at the time when J will be expiring, is to look at the maintenance of streets and roads. I mean, potholes. That is, and to really be candid about how those resources could be available, because they're going away. But I've heard from a lot of parents, and certainly focusing on transit, that are really concerned about wanting to get their kids to school and get on buses, have safe access to school through transit that not only gets the kids to and from school in a safe way, but also reduces congestion. So I think it would be helpful to really look into the sort of the hearts and minds of our residents and say, what do they need? As opposed to perhaps an entity that's, anyway, I think that we can hear from those residents and accommodate and respond to their focus. But I know that when we look at the constraints around the state of California, we're not widening corridors. And that really was one of the models of the school bus program that was predicated upon reducing congestion, getting kids to school without widening roads. Now, the problem is it's expensive, and you have to figure out a way to fund it in partnership with the public transit agencies, I think, that are very excited about the opportunity of, again, we talk about the kids and the grandmothers, the folks that are on those buses, that they rely on them every day. So I think it's, Contra Costa. The other thing that's important too is for everybody in each area to feel that they are getting their share of funding. And that's very different from the approach that the state of California is taking right now. So I think if we're going to be reaching out to voters, we're going to need to really, we're fortunate that we have these sub-regional areas where you have different terrain, different land use patterns, different, but so that those programs can really meet those local needs. Thanks.
And piggybacking on what, is it with Director? No. Commissioner Worth said, Amy, Representative.
Call me Amy.
Not everything has been widened. In our neck of the woods, people have the worst commute, according to, what was it, the Chronicle? And I'm hearing a lot of concern about Vasco Road and 239 and the roads out there. And so even though for the most part a lot of Contra Costa has been doing that per what our Representative Amy Worth said, I don't remember. There's so many titles, sorry about that. Our community will want that increase in helping us not have the longer commutes, helping us have safer roads. Those are really important to us. And the new technology and all of that is great. And I aspire for us to have kids that don't want to drive, but they still do. And we're a thoroughfare from the Central Valley. And so that is another transportation system that we can't control.
And finishing Highway 4.
And not to give a sneak preview of next week's board workshop, but we will be getting into that. I think there's a whole category we've carved out for that, so we'll be happy to hear your input there.
I was just throwing it out because everybody else was kind of adding their thing, so.
Just keep bringing it up.
And Aaron told me to say it.
Oh, throw him under the bus.
Just kidding.
She knows better than that. Any other comments? Terry Ann, are there any public comments?
We have no public comment, written or verbal.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Second.
We have a first and second. Terry Ann, can you call roll, please?
Commissioner Arnridge?
Aye.
Commissioner Bernal?
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Obringer?
Yes.
Commissioner Altstepper? Commissioner Xavier?
Aye.
Vice Chair G?
Aye.
Chair Meadows?
Aye.
Motion passes with Commissioners Carlson and Nowak absent.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt and Carrie. Staff is requesting that the next item, seeking approval to release request for proposal number 2503 for development of the countywide emergency evacuation study, be pulled from the discussion. Staff will bring it back to a future meeting for discussion and consideration for approval. Do we have a consensus from the authority board to do that?
Do you need a motion?
I don't need a motion, just
Okay, yes.
Yes.
Consensus, yes.
perfect, thank you. The next item is an action item to be presented by Danielle Elkins to execute an agreement with Advanced Mobility Group to complete the countywide Safe Routes to School project.
Chair and board members, on the topic of student transportation, timely, we are asking for recommendation to execute this contract for our Safe Routes to School program. This is what funds programs like Street Smarts and bike and ped and safety programs for children, where they go to schools and present at assemblies to help students more safely travel to school. We listed this RFP and had 403 vendors that looked at that it was pushed out to, as well as 4 that downloaded it. We only had 1 response, but we wanted to make sure that it was clear that we followed our procurement guidelines. We posted it as we normally would through our procurement process. We included it in our Meet the Prime outreach event. We shared it out through LinkedIn. We gave opportunity for vendors to ask questions and clarifications on the scope. We resulted in 1 proposal from AMG. In addition to AMG as the prime, there are also subs involved that are going to be providing specialized routes to school mapping, website and social media management. And I wanted to make sure that we addressed all of the concerns. We've documented everything, and receiving the 1 bid, we still are making the recommendation to issue this contract. And that is it. All right.
Are there any questions or comments from the Authority Board? Commissioner Kelly?
Actually, I have one question. I'm just looking, and again, this is the challenge of, are you including San Ramon Valley as Central County? Because I'm looking at the language just on page, and not that I highlighted this on every page, but it just says SRTS, Education and Encouragement of Activities at School Sites in East Contra Costa County, Central Contra Costa, and La Marinda areas for 4-year period. So
Our partners are the City of San Ramon, Contra Costa County Health, as well as 511 Contra Costa, so it is included.
Okay. Does it tie into the Street Smart San Ramon Valley?
Yes.
Which does include town of Danville and unincorporated areas? Okay.
Yep,
Great.
it's
Thank
funding
you.
that team.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Stepper?
Just clarify, so you're saying those other cities were listed in the bid, that you only got 1 bid?
There's partners on this project. They are part of the OBAG 3 award for Safe Routes to School. This is just to issue a contract award for the team that is overseeing the entire kind of program and facilitating the
Thank you for the
connection
clarification.
between all of the different entities.
Any other questions or comments? Terry Ann, do we have any public comments?
No public comment, written or verbal.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Commissioner Arnrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Bernal,
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Obringer,
Yes.
Commissioner Altstepper, Commissioner Xavier,
Aye.
Vice Chair G,
Aye.
Chair Meadows. Motion passes unanimously with Commissioners Carlson and Nowak absent.
That concludes our regular agenda items. We have no correspondence in the packet unless something was slipped in. I got a long memory. Item 12, correspondence and communications. Next is we have a meeting report from Transplan, a notice of cancellation from SWAT in the agenda packet. We have a meeting report from Transpac. It was provided in the handout packet, and WCC-TAC meeting in April was canceled. At this time, we'll move to Authority Board and staff comments. I have no comments. Does the commissioners have any comments? Yes, Commissioner Xavier.
At the last meeting, at the end, I spoke about the Rommel Boulevard Complete Streets project in San Pablo. And at that time, I said, we won 4 awards. We know we won another one a couple days later. It was American Public Works Association National Award for Small Cities and Rural Communities Public Works Projects of the Year in Transportation for 2025. So that's a national award. Little brag.
No other commissioner reports? Do you have any representative reports? Tim, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Meadows and Commissioners. Good evening. Just a couple updates and announcements for you. So I have a piece of paper with all of the upcoming community events for the summer. And so we have community events in Pinole, Richmond, Hercules, Antioch, Danville, Pleasant Hill, Lafayette, Walnut Creek, Clayton, as well as Concord Senior Center and Brentwood. And so what we're asking is that I'm going to send this around. If everyone could put their initials or name on which event they would be hopefully, or at least take a picture of it and consider it in your calendars. So just what we're really looking for is really strong representation from the authority board at these events. This community event series this summer is extremely important, as you all know, relative to the CTP and also potential development of a future expenditure plan, which we'll be talking more about at the board workshop. And so I think that if a event is in your sub-region, it'd be great if you can attend. So I'm going to send this around and everyone can just highlight, take a look at it, and let us know if you're able to attend. The other announcement is I just got notice yesterday. I did send an email to the entire board this morning, but Bart is, and I'm going to steal Matt's probably announcement here, but I guess you missed your opportunity, actually.
Yeah, he's done.
Yeah, so, but we do have a ribbon cutting next Thursday at Pleasant Hill BART Station, right across the road here, to basically do a ribbon cutting for the completion of all of the next generation fair gates in Contra Costa County. Congressman Mark DeSaulnier will be there. We will also have a speaker from CCTA, which I'm still finalizing. It's after the board workshop, so we will make it a point to finish the board workshop as early as possible, 4:30, so everyone can have an opportunity, if you want, to come back this way and attend the ribbon cutting. So I think it's going to be it'll be very well attended. And also, did want to announce we did receive an award. We will be receiving an award in about 2 weeks from the California Transportation Foundation for active transportation for the McCollum pedestrian overcrossing. So I'm really excited about that. And I happen to be the chair of CTF this year. So, full disclosure. So, and it's a great project. And so excited to be receiving that award in the next couple of weeks. And then also want to mention I think everyone's aware of the board workshop, and I think a lot of your comments on the blueprint are very well received. It really is a great opportunity to kind of tee up the conversation at the workshop. We will be basically sharing with you about 4 or 5 what we're calling visions or transformative moves that can help kind of encapsulate, what the blueprint can bring to each of these communities and bring to the people and give some tangible outcomes. And so we'll be talking a lot about that at the board workshop. And then also really starting to dive into really measurement of success. And then also another component we're going to be talking about is really the growing sustainably and the growth management program and how we may want to modernize that relative to land use and housing. And so we're going to be talking a lot about that on Thursday. Friday, we're going to be talking about the integrated transit plan and really the conclusion and draft recommendations to kind of get your input so we can finalize that. Other updates that are in the executive director report. We had a fantastic Redefining Mobility Summit. We had our largest attendance yet, and it was our 10th anniversary. Had a fantastic demonstration zone, had fantastic speakers. We also showcased our students in a much bigger way. We actually brought the students actually on the stage this year and actually awarded scholarships for actually a competition that we did where they drafted what they think the future of transportation would look like, and also an art competition as well. So it was really, really cool to see what the students and what the younger generation is really thinking. And then also, we did something different this year. We also announced our brand new youth program called Discover Engineering. It's a brand new student program that we're going to be doing a youth summer camp as part of the revenues that are generated by the Redefine Mobility Summit. So we're really excited about this new summer youth program this summer. And then also the demo day afterwards was a huge success. So we actually, through the revenues of RMS, we chartered a bus, and we actually took a lot of our VIPs and we actually ventured out into Contra Costa County, and everyone got an opportunity to to be able to experience our Presto program. So basically from Rossmore to Martinez and also to the Glideways facility in Richmond, as well as Gomentum Station. So it was a really, really fantastic tour, got a lot of compliments. So a lot of buzz that happened from RMS. It was a fantastic event. Jumping more into the kind of state and federal regulatory side, on April 25th, the California DMV did release their commercial freight AV regulations as a draft rule. And so it does prohibit passenger service in any autonomous vehicle over 10,000 pounds, which basically precludes anything public transit. And so we are going to be weighing in with a comment letter on that, and we're working with the California Transit Association on that. So that's a big deal because it really precludes essentially our entire autonomous shuttle program in terms of the next generation shuttle, which will be over 10,000 pounds. So we'll be weighing in that pretty heavily with the California Transit Association. This week, we participated in a number of DC meetings, and so really, really great meetings. I already got a preview of some of those comments. Huge focus and emphasis on AV regulatory framework. Also a huge focus on reauthorization. Generally, what we're hearing on the reauthorization is they want to get a draft done by the end of the year. We're also hearing that they're probably going to remove a lot of the programs that were added in the IIJA, as well as consolidate a lot of programs to make the discretionary side a little bit more simpler. They're definitely anticipating, just based on debt ceiling and everything, that there will be a lower amount. That's definitely going to be anticipated. And they're also anticipating giving more formula funds. And I think that's a huge important element because we do compete for those formula funds Bay Area wide through the OBAG program. So it's great feedback, and it was also good to really meet the new leadership. You know, a lot of staffers have changed, and we got to meet with the majority side, and so it was great to kind of introduce CCTA, talk about what we're doing, kind of more brand recognition, and really offer our support. And then lastly that I have is the WTS event is on June 6th at 5:30. Nope. Is it June 5th? Sorry. The WTS event's on June 5th. Commissioner Glover was going to be receiving the Man of the Year award. And so we are working with WTS to do a tribute for federal. So I will send the details out to everyone if everyone would like to go and attend. But if anyone has any ideas or any interest, please let me share with me, text message, call me. But we are working with WTS to do like a tribute for federal. I will be reaching out to Janice to see if she'll be willing to accept the award on his behalf. But it's really sad. And so I want to, with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to the chair to close and adjourn our meeting.
Thanks, Tim. Next item's calendar. We have calendars included in the agenda packet. Now for adjournment. This concludes our meeting. Look forward to seeing you all next week out in Oakley. We will now adjourn this meeting in the honor and memory of past Commissioner Federal Glover. This meeting is adjourned at 8:37. Thank you.